I'm Veronica Gonzalez from 95.5 The Q. Stoked to be in the presence of Tim Mcllrath of Rise Against. Now, thank you so much for joining us, right? Especially before kicking off your summer tour. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this one for a long time. It's been, we haven't meaningfully toured since like the end of 2018. We didn't know it would be this long. It was not our intention to be off the road this long. But the second we saw that the lights were coming back on, we jumped at the opportunity to get back on the road.
Now, over the last 20 years, you and the rest of the guys have experienced some important life events together. For example, when US invaded Iraq for the first time, or 9/11, you all spent so much time together that you all experienced tragic times together as a band, now surviving a pandemic. Do you guys ever lean on each other for any other kind of support?
The band is sort of like picture like the job that you first had like 20 years ago, right? Whatever it might have been, like, and whoever you worked with at that time, like that's what we're doing. That we're still in that same job.
That's crazy though. I mean, to be together that long and like still like work with each other and everything.
Right. That's so it's like whatever job you had, like there was like, the water cooler talk, right? You're kind of sitting around like, oh, did you see this in the news today? That's crazy, And I've been doing that with the same three dudes pretty much for like a long time. So whenever things are unfolding, we're usually the first person I usually see is, somebody in my band, because we're usually backstage or on a bus or on a plane or traveling or something like that. So yeah, we're going through it all together. Like we're watching the news like from a hotel bar somewhere, and then so we're each other's kind of sounding boards. Like the four of us are kind of on the same page about most things, which I guess is sort of rare in this planet nowadays. And I was trying to figure out like what and why, and I think that's a lot of it. It's like I think we've hashed these things out together like in real time.
Yeah. Something exciting Rise Against got to experience was when Mayor Lori Lightfoot proclaimed June 4th as Rise Against Day to celebrate the release of the band's ninth studio album, Know Our Generation. Now, how did it feel to have a day dedicated to your band's achievements?
Yeah, that one I'm still reeling from, because Chicago is definitely like, to me, it's the greatest city in the world. And to be recognized by it is something I never saw coming. Like Rise Against, everything we did was kind of in the underground. You know what I mean? We were never, when we started, we were playing your very non-traditional venues. We weren't even part of like the whole world of live music. We were doing things in basements and bowling alleys and veterans halls and that kind of thing. And so to have something like Chicago like acknowledge the part of like the mosaic of Chicago of art, like that's pretty huge and something that will definitely, and whenever this whole thing is over, it's something I'll definitely talk about.
Now, I want to take you down memory lane real quick. A little throwback, I guess you can call it. My forever all-time favorite Rise Against song is Swing Life Away. Now, which was written at the time you were living in a house with no air conditioning where you spent a lot of time on the front porch in Chicago. Do you ever go visit that house when you're in town?
I have. Over the last, 20 years. Well, I guess, like 20 years. Every once in a while, I kind of drive by. And like, I have a 17-year-old daughter, and when she was born, that's where I was living. You know what I mean? So like we brought her back to that house. So I always like we drive by and be like, that's the house, this thing right here.
Cool.
We lived in that attic apartment, you know what I mean? And you had no air conditioning, and we were trying to figure out what the hell was going on, and I was in a band.
But look at you now. Isn't that so crazy? You can look back and be like, look at those times, and then look at us now. So
right. So the moral of the story is quit school and start a band.
And start. Now, sometime last year during the pandemic, you did not waste any time, sir. By that, I mean, you really made sure to be productive with your time by going back to college. How did you manage to juggle your time around family, music, and school?
I just finished the album. And so like for me, when I make an album, it's really exhausting. And like, I was pretty just exasperated by the end of it. And I wasn't in like creative mode anymore. I'd already done it. You know what I mean? I was more like in listening mode. And, the band kidnapped me when I was a junior in college. And so I had just like that last year just kind of lingering, like I was so close to the finish line. And so I was talked about going back, and I meant well. Obviously, the band kind of snowballed into something bigger than any of us anticipated. And so when that time came up, I was like, well, A, I got time. B, I'm not ready to dive back into music right now. I'm kind of burned on it. I'm going to do this. Before I committed to doing it, I signed up knowing that I could cancel if I wanted to. And then I just played chicken with that cancel date. I was like, all right, I'll cancel tomorrow. I'm not going to cancel tomorrow. And the next, yeah, exactly. And then even the first day came, and I'm like, I could still cancel like 2 weeks in, and they'll, it won't count against anything. And then next thing you know, I was in it. I got into a routine, and then like, the pandemic just stretched on so long that it was like, well, what else am I doing here? Like, this is a good time to do it. And so it turned into like a saving grace for me, a way to really kind of just not go crazy. We just made our 9th album. We're going to make our 10th album at some point. It's good to, like, the brain is a muscle. You know what I mean? If you're going to write about stuff and you're going to, create these songs, it's good to be inspired by everything, Yeah.
And like, I've even thought about going back to school, but I'm like, oh man, I forgot everything I learned when I was in college until I took that break. And I'm like, never mind. I think I'll just skip that.
Yeah, I know. That's definitely, there were times where I was so overwhelmed and like stressed out and like working on a research paper and thinking to myself, like in the back of my head, there was a voice saying, you realize that you voluntarily did this to get a degree you're probably not going to use, and insult to injury, you're paying for it.
But it's worth it though. It's worth it.
Yeah, in the end, it was really worth it. I'm actually considering doing more, because it was like,
oh really?
Yeah, because it was just like, well, I actually enjoyed it. I did.
Yeah. Let's just hope for not another pandemic though.
Right. Yeah.
Now, for animal lovers such as myself, what happened when you were younger that animal rights became like your gateway drug into activism in general?
I think like I got into punk and hardcore, and at those shows, there was always kind of an animal rights table, people kind of passing out literature and this kind of thing. Like, oh, here's what goes on in slaughterhouses. Here's some of the issues behind environmentalism and animals. And I guess the biggest thing was like basically someone telling me like, that you don't have to eat meat. And I was like, wait, what? No, yeah, you do. We have to eat meat. That's how we survive. And then I started to realize like, no, we choose to do it, but it's not like we have to do it. And then it was like, whoa, that's a crazy thought to like not eat meat. Like that to me, that was radical, to like leave that off of your plate. And really, it was just like, it was one of those, like they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was sort of like the actual suffering that takes place in the production of meat was something that I couldn't turn off in my brain once I saw it. You know what I mean? It was, and it honestly wasn't even so much like the death of an animal or whatever it was. It's the actual suffering that's implicit into the process, the amount of suffering, Yeah. And then I was like, well, I don't want to be a part of that. And then so I just, it's one of those things that I don't even know if it was a conscious decision. I couldn't even lift the fork to my mouth anymore. I was like, I guess I'm done doing this. Like, and that was 20 some odd years ago, 25 years ago. And so, never look back. And it's a far easier thing to like do than anybody. Like, it doesn't to me, it doesn't require like discipline or anything like that. It's like once you leave it out, and you don't think about it.
I remember it was really hard for me once for Lent. I gave up meat for like 40 days and 40 nights. I ended up messing it up with like a week before, because I forgot that I don't know why, I don't know how I forgot, but my dad was cooking dinner one day and I was like, oh, and I like went some and I got some and I tried it and he was just like, wait, I thought you gave it meat. And I was like, oh yeah, that was so
right. We're just so like in routines and habits. And
I know. Kind of thing, so,
and I think it's like, even that, like, there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why I always tell people, like, I'm a realist in the sense that I realize that a world going vegan or vegetarian is kind of a fantasy. It's not ever going to really happen, but like, be mindful of what you eat. You know what I mean? Take Mondays off of meat. You know what I mean? Take one day a week, like, but like leave less, and it'll have a huge impact on your health, but also just the environment. You know what I mean? Like, it's really, we're learning more and more about the factory farming and what how corporations have done to meat production, and just how harmful it is to the planet.
Yeah, exactly. Have your daughters wanted to follow in your footsteps?
No, my daughters could probably not even name a song. Actually, that's kind of like, or they are, they're into music, but they're into their own music. Like what I do is kind of like what dad does,
Really?
Yeah. My youngest is like a classically trained violin player. And then my oldest, she's just like a music head. Like she loves hip hop and pop and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but just nothing in my world, you know what I mean? And so I've I've learned more from them than they've learned from me, probably. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I can't even read music, but my 13-year-old can like read Vivaldi. You know what I mean?
Oh
So
my
like
God.
I'm like constantly blown away by her ability to get through this stuff.
Yeah.
And then my oldest is trying to like, you know, play me like the latest like pop song or mumble rap song of the day. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, I'm learning about this too. You know what I mean? And
And
when they
have
were
you ever gotten
younger,
any of the music that they've showed you? Have you been like, oh, I like this one?
yeah, totally. Like my daughter who first discovered like Billie Eilish when she was still just coming out on like SoundCloud and all those things. Like we went and saw her in like a 1100 cap room in Chicago like a few years back before she blew up. And
Yeah.
my daughter turned me on to like Lord, which I thought was really
Yeah.
great songwriting. And so like I find most of it I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know if I could do this. But then I'll find like the gems where I'm like, oh, this is really cool songwriting. Like I really like this, and so
Yeah.
and I think they they were sort of impressed. I remember they love Halsey, and like
Love
I think
her.
she posted a picture of like a porch swing and it said "Swing Life Away"
Oh,
on her
yes.
post or whatever.
Yes,
And so
I saw that.
and I remember and they were like, "Dad," I'm like, "See, okay, all right, see,"
Okay.
you know. Uh,
Matt, and just curious, have your kids, friends, like ever been like, oh my God, ask your dad to get us like backstage at their concert? Has that ever happened?
I've been to all the shows. I've been to the Shawn Mendes, the Taylor Swift, the Ariana Grande, like whatever like big Christmas pop show hits your city. You know what I mean? Like I'm like the dad in the crowd for sure. Like with my kids like screaming. So and if I can, like if we like say if I share a label with the artist, whatever like that, or I know somebody like you at radio, whatever, we'll like they've met some of these people. So like which is it's pretty cool. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's kind of how they grew up too. Like it's interesting to think about one day you're not going to be in the front row. One day this is like we
It'd
got
be
hooked up
fun.
today, but just so you know, like this isn't how I went to shows when I was younger. You know what I
I
mean?
know.
Like listen through a wall outside.
And what about your shows? Have they like their friends ever been like, hey, let's go to your dad's show, get us backstage?
Yeah, they'll bring their friends out if we play in town. You know what I mean? It's more like I'm more like a tourist attraction though than I am like a really meaningful engagement. It's like, oh, it's cool. We can be backstage and there's free food. But yeah, like I think that they enjoy kind of showing that world because they grew up in that world. It's all they know, like my band and my crew, and they've come on tour with me and they've slept on tour buses and
Wow.
they've been around the world. We've
Yeah.
done they've come on me and tour in Europe and Japan and stuff like that. So that's kind of very normal to them. So they get excited to like show it to their friends. Like, oh, here's how
Like,
this works. And that's where they sleep. And this is catering. And like, there's the dressing rooms. And here's where you can go. And here's where we can't go. And et cetera, et cetera. So I
yeah.
think that it's cool that they got that experience.
Well, thank you so much, Tim, for giving me your time and talking with us today and letting us know about you and Rise Against and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. And thank you to all the fans in the area, everyone who supports us. We really appreciate all the love.
Yes, hopefully we'll see you guys soon in El Paso.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tim.